I think that's probably pretty common among many companies, that our main problem was not that we didn't have enough content. It was almost the opposite. It was like we had too much, right? And the customers were lost.
Once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Experience Podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as we explore how digital can help enhance the customer and employee experience. My goal is to share what my guests and I have learned over the years so that you can get the insights that you need to evolve your own digital programs. If you'd like more info, need to get in touch, or sign up for the weekly companion newsletter that has additional articles and resources in it, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. For now, let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the Digital CX Podcast. My name is Alex Turkovich. You're listening to episode 73, and welcome back to the show where we talk about digital and CX. I'm joined today by Natalia Andreeva and Kaelon Russell, who are a phenomenal team at 15Five. And a huge shout out to Sarah Roberts, actually, who introduced me to Natalia and Kaelon. And the reason why I thought it was pertinent to have them on the show is because they're in the mix of it. They're in the throes of building out digital at 15Five, and it's not every day that you get to have insight into folks that are in the middle of building stuff, you know? So I definitely wanted to have them on because really what I'm trying to do more and more on this show is to invite operators on, people who are doing the thing, so that you can get the insights of what they're doing to build your own programs. And so in today's episode, we definitely talk at length about the approach that they're taking at 15Five, how they're addressing certain things, how they're approaching, building the program, and their own approach to digital maturity as well. So it's super cool. I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Natalia Andreeva and Kaelon Russell of 15Five, because I sure did. Very pleased to welcome to the show Kaelon and Natalia from 15Five. We've got a really cool episode lined up for you guys today, but I figured first and foremost, I would love for you to kind of introduce yourself, give a little bit of background. What's your story? What led you into CS and all that kind of fun stuff? Natalia, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Natalia Andreeva, and I've dedicated pretty much my entire career to customer success. And I think it's been 14 years. I counted yesterday. And originally I started in smaller startups, and one of which was acquired by Slack. And I spent a few years there. And after that, I moved on to lead a customer success organization at Gorgeous. And now I am building a digital customer success organizations for 15Five, along with Kaelon and other amazing human beings.
Cool. Kaelon, who are you?
Yeah. I'm Kaelon. I manage our digital customer experience team, and I always find people's journey into CX interesting. More and more you're seeing it as a career start, but I think when I started, it was definitely less of a role. So it's been a winding road. I started as a customer experience career as what they call a wellness coordinator or wellness strategist for Cerner Healthcare. So, kind of got some experience with just a massive organization doing something a little bit different, and then moved into some CX consulting and program management for benefits companies. I had the opportunity to found a few small companies, and then took a break from tech for a little bit and did some volunteer work with AmeriCorps. Kind of inadvertently became the co-owner of a CrossFit gym, sort of by accident. And then around 2018, I felt the itch to get back into tech and CX and found 15Five, moved up to the Bay Area, and it was, I wanted to do something that felt entrepreneurial without having the pressure and financial stress of being the co-founder. So 15Five was Series A, and I've been here for 5 years and had an opportunity to work in a few different roles, all under CX. Yeah, and most recently just came back from paternity leave in January. And lucky enough that Natalia tapped me for how to help and stand up and build this new function. So
Cool.
It's been a lot of fun so far.
I think that that's an amazing kind of correlation from entrepreneur to standing up digital CS, because it is very entrepreneurial. Like you have to be kind of scrappy. You got to, kind of make do with what you have and tie some things together that might not kind of naturally fit together. So do you feel like that experience in your entrepreneurial past has served you well?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who works in small stage startups has to have a little bit of that
True.
entrepreneurial spirit, right? So for me, for sure, it scratches that itch of getting to build something new and take a little bit of risk. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. I dig it. From accidental CrossFit gym member, gym owner, to digital CS practitioner. That's pretty cool. So, as you guys know, I think you've listened to the show a couple of times at least. One of the things that I do ask all of my guests is kind of their own elevator pitch of what digital customer success is, because as we well know, it changes with every kind of organization or every function that you work in. It's a different beast, right? So I'd love to hear from both of you. I don't know if you want to tag team it or single file line it, but what would be your definition of digital CS?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that digital customer success is a motion that leverages digital tools and strategies to ensure that all our customers are achieving their desired outcomes. Right. I do think that it's a new standard for customer success organizations. I do think that it enables scalable, personalized, and proactive customer engagements.
Yeah, yeah. I like your kind of tie to the new standard, because it kind of is, like even a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, it wasn't necessarily the norm to have digital CS as a bespoke function. Sure, you had some automations and whatever in place, but you didn't call it digital CS. You didn't have people necessarily hired for digital CS, or you didn't have an ops function that was focused on it. It was like, let's hire a bunch of CSMs and let's call our customers.
Yeah, and I also think that there is a lot of these terms flying around, like the pooled CS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the scaled CS, then digital and all of that. So I think as an industry in general, we're evolving into distinguishing what each one of those is and how do you tie it together and how do you differentiate digital from all of them.
Yep.
Right. So, and I think it's been a very interesting journey to be trying to differentiate that.
Absolutely. Kaelon, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree with what Natalia shared. I think she captured it really well. I'll just say, like, our approach at 15Five is definitely under the banner of digital for all. So the mantra I keep telling myself, our team, the rest of the organization is, can we get the right people at the right account, the right information in the right channel at the right time, so they can get the highest possible value from our product. And like, obviously a lot of right has to go right there for that to work. So I think, right, we can sit at the intersection of a lot of different functions, but we are definitely trying to, and as we found our footing over the last year to six months, aggressively last year, sort of as a slow roll and testing, moving from that sort of mentality of pool or scaled into a true digital for all motion where you can think through, okay, how does this apply not just to long tail or SMB customers, but regardless of price point, product. And then for the human, the high touch, the human led team, how are we supporting them in getting the most operational efficiency out of the products and the tech stack that our CSMs use, so they can take that same digital toolkit we would deliver, put a more personalized spin on it, but have those things served up just in time for them as well. So we have our customers and then our internal customers with the rest of the high touch team.
Yeah, you guys are preaching to the choir on that one. Like this is something that I've been screaming about for like a year now, is the fact that your digital motion isn't just customer facing. Your customers include your internal CSMs, because we need to make those folks like as efficient and kind of streamlined as humanly possible. So I super appreciate you bringing that to the table. One of the reasons why I was so excited to talk with both of you, and I'm super grateful to Sarah Roberts, by the way, shout out Sarah for introducing us, was the fact that you are in the throes of building this thing, right? And granted, I think a digital program is never built. Like you're never done, but you mentioned you're like 6 months to a year down this path of building digital. What you've shared with me so far is really cool. It's I feel like you all have approached it with a very kind of mature and well thought out manner, including doing your own like maturity assessment and those kinds of things as well. So if you wouldn't mind, take a few minutes and walk us through that journey of deciding strategically, okay, now we really need to focus on digital CS. How are we going to start thinking about this? How are we going to start implementing these things? What did you start with? How did you prioritize? Like, just walk us through that journey a little bit.
So I began advocating for this program back in Q4 of 2022.
Mm,
And the first step that we took was for me to take over our content team, right? Because content is the foundation for everything digital and everything AI, really, right? So, and I remember when we did that, the first thing we did is we sat together with a team and we reevaluated our approach to content in general, right? So we realized that we were producing a lot, but it wasn't quite part of a bigger strategy, if you will, right? And it also wasn't very data driven, right?
yeah.
So our new mantra from that moment on was like, okay, does the piece of content contain a CTA, and can we measure it, right? So the answer is not always yes, but that like reframing helped us get to the next phase, which was, okay, let's run a few experiments to see if there's something bigger here, right? This is something more tangible that we can then tie to business metrics that will allow us to build this whole, beautiful digital world that we were all like dreaming about. So we ran a few experiments. Among those were the digital-led onboarding and office hours. And
Mm-hmm.
what we saw is a pretty significant increase on MAU. So monthly active users count was going up. And at that point, I pretty much had everything to build, like the business case, and I was able to tie it to our retention numbers. And luckily, we were fortunate enough to have a CCO who is very like into digital, and he was supporting this whole transformation. So it wasn't a very hard battle to win, to be
Yeah.
fair. But it was like this like gradual process of like, okay, take a small piece, then tie it to metrics, and
Mm-hmm.
then kind of earn the right to do the next thing.
Yeah.
And then you go step by step. And as a result of that, today we have two teams within our, we call it digital-led engagement organization. One team is the content team that produces the content that then is being distributed by Kaelon's team, the team of digital customer experience managers. And I'm sure, Kaelon, you'll share some more about your experience of building that team as well.
That's really cool. I want to hit before we hit into that. I'm going to put a pin in that because I want to hit on a couple things that you talked about, because I think this notion of an MVP for the program is a really cool one, and I think it's I guess it's kind of obvious, but a lot of people still don't go down this route. They like plan this whole big thing out before it's really kind of proven out. So you started with digital onboarding, you started with office hours, which I think are two very easy, low kind of effort places to start. Absolutely. And then attribution to that was your proof point to go to go then sell the program as a whole. So what I'm getting at is what did that onboarding look like, or what does it look like? Was it a drip campaign? Was it video? Was it like, what was it, and how has it evolved maybe?
Yeah, definitely. Well, to your point, it's never quite built,
Yeah.
right? But the first iteration was, we've gone through maybe five by now, really, and it's constantly evolving. So the first one was a drip series of videos that were where we were trying to hit what we thought, at least we hypothesized, were the most important pain points for the customer throughout that stage, right? So I think that's probably pretty common among many companies, that our main problem was not that we didn't have enough content. It was almost the opposite. It was like we had too much, right? And the customers were lost into, okay, wait, what? Like, you overwhelm me with all of these, numerous help center articles and, academies and whatnot. But like, what is that one thing that I need to do? So, and to be fair, for that very first iteration, we didn't even have any like data analytics team, right? So it wasn't very data driven. We just said like, okay, like, we have common sense, we know our customers, let's create a hypothesis, right, on what it is that at every single stage of the customer journey that we believe the customer needs to be unblocked from, right? And that's literally all we did. And and that was successful enough for us to justify the next iteration, which was much more elaborate, right? Which was already like a combination between drip emails and in-app ups and guys, right? And what we're working on right now is even the next stage, which is we're trying to add AI into it, right? We have our own like Spark AI tool, which is part of our product actually, right? So we're partnering with R&D on how do we power it by AI.
Using your own stuff. I love that. A novel idea. You said something very important that I feel like is something that everyone should take away from this conversation, which is the purpose of your emails or your onboarding flow or your in-app notifications shouldn't be to let your customer know about a tool. It should be to let your customer know about an objective or an outcome that they need to reach as part of their onboarding journey, right? There's so many drip campaigns I've seen that's like, oh, here's our LMS. Great. You can go take some courses, and they never do. Here's our community. Go ask some questions. They never do that, versus step one, set up your profile. Step two, set up this integration step. It's like those things that are the barrier to entry that all of your customers face, yet so many onboarding flows fail to really hit that hard. So kudos. Nice one. Awesome.
Thank you.
That's really cool. So, okay. So fast forward, you've done some basic things, some office hours, some onboarding flows. You've proven some success there. What did the attribution of that look like? In other words, how did you measure that? How did you feed your business case to then prove out, okay, we need to go build this out at scale?
Yeah. So I think the easiest metric to tie to were like monthly active usage of our customers, right? But in addition to that, we do have the health model in place that we can probably talk a little bit more later if that's interesting. So I think in general, when I'm building business cases like that, what I'm trying to take into account is like, how do I connect the very granular, very tactical user behaviors with high level business needs, right? So what are the top line metrics that the business cares about, right? And how do I paint this picture for them in numbers, right? So again, it's not always possible, especially when you're beginning, right? So you don't have enough resources. You definitely don't have a data team to support you on that when it's just an idea, right? But you can run an analysis in the spreadsheets to see, okay, of those, say, customers who attended office hours versus didn't, right? What their MAU rates are, right? And so pretty simple things like that. Of course, then you get more sophisticated as this gets more and more attention. But at least to paint that picture and paint what that future can look like if we do this right, I think was the story.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. Okay. So you built the business case, you presented it. They're like, go to town, get digital with your customers. And now fast forward, you have essentially two teams. You mentioned a content team, which makes perfect sense. And then digital CX managers. Kaelon, do you want to run us a little bit through, your team, how big it is, what folks are like, what are the daily tasks of your team, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. So when I sort of joined on this team, the business case was proven out, and then the business need obviously soon followed, right? So we were moving from an experiment and idea to now 50% or roughly, right, 50% of the business is going through this digital treatment. So we had a pretty tight turnaround to assemble a team back in January. And I think when speed is the name of the game, you kind of have to build the plane while you're flying it. And that's probably not news to anyone listening here, but I knew we wanted to have a diverse skill set, right? There had to be people who were familiar with the product. We wanted people who had some CX experience, some CSM experience, right? Digital kind of sits at this crossroad between ops, like traditional CSM activities, customer marketing, customer education, product design, right? So I wanted to go and find, how can we build up a team where we get representation of a little bit of all of that? Luckily, Natalia had already stood up kind of the content team. So we had customer education, webinars, academy, success centers up and running. We had some in-app design already going on. And that made my life a little bit easier to say, okay, we have this operational side. We need to look at data. We need to design campaigns, and we need to be able to staff some of these webinars one-to-many or one-on-one in order to successfully streamline and deliver that content across the customer journey. So we had 4 seats, and I was able to hire two CSMs from the high touch team who are interested in exploring digital and kind of wanted to be at the pointy end of the spear in customer success, right? Do something a little bit new. And also was able to bring on 1 technical account manager. So we had a support engineer who'd been sort of in this TAM type role and really knew the back end, the more technical nature of the product, whereas the CSMs knew a bit more of the persona, the customer journey, how to run a meeting effectively, right? Some of the basic CSM skills. And that left 1 open spot. We really wanted to go external for that. So we had 3 internal hires. We were standing up the team. And then we had this big, long wish list of a job description. And it was a little harder than I anticipated to find somebody who could check all those boxes. I think, Alex, you mentioned, right, it's a newer job title that you're seeing out there. So we had a lot of really interesting candidates, but nobody really ticked all of the boxes who were coming in through our traditional recruiting channels. And we actually ended up hiring a great referral who had 0 background in customer experience. She was a program manager at a really large organization. She'd been had experience working in college recruitment and admissions, and she had experience kind of in this program management with a really large organization. So it was fun bringing in, kind of opening our horizons up, and instead of putting blinders on and saying we need a digital CX program designer, right? That narrowed the pool quite a bit. And so far it's been working great. And then okay, so what do we do in the day-to-day, right? So I think for our team, I imagine this dial between kind of high touch human intervention and fully digital. And for sure, at the beginning, we definitely had to dial a little bit more onto the human side. And then experiment and kind of back out to find the minimum effective dosage of human required to elicit the behavior change that we wanted with our customers. So we ran an example campaign of what we called our abandoned cart, right? So somebody went into our product. We're not e-commerce, but it works in e-commerce. And so as I was jumping into this role, I tried to think about B2C is a really good use case. B2B, it's relatively new, but B2C has been doing digital forever, right? That's all they generally have.
And doing it well forever.
I can't tell you how much Instagram ad merchandise I've ended up buying with, some kind of follow-up campaign.
The TikTok shop will be the death of me.
100%. So we did this abandoned cart style campaign, and we ran 3 different cohorts through it, with the first one being like, hey, noticed you started setting up an engagement survey. You didn't finish it. Let's jump on a phone call. And the second one was, okay, let's give you a video walkthrough, and then we'll offer the office hours after. Are you able to do it with the video? And the third cohort went through hey, here's a great webinar we're running. The second week they got a video. The third week we got the office hour, and we were able to sort of dial in by product a little bit how much human was needed. And I would definitely say in the early days, I think our organization, our cross-functional partners, were a little bit unclear on exactly what we did. We were a little bit unclear exactly where we would fit. And it was a lot of experimentation and a lot of shotgun kind of approach. a lot of one-time campaigns where we discovered a data gap, right? Someone from our analytics team would call up a table and say, hey, we found X% of customers are only doing this. Like, what can you do with that?
Yeah.
All right, well, go after that. So we're kind of running around, a lot of task switching. And as we got our feet under us and got some data back from these campaigns, we started moving into a much more strategic programs, clearer journeys, proving out the impact and sharing the success story also across the organization of, hey, this is the campaign we're running. We're not just over in the Wild West firing off emails to all of our customers, but like, here's our strategy.
Yeah.
Here's where we're plugging it in. Here's what we're seeing. And that allowed us to partner a lot closer with product, with our partnerships teams, with our sales teams, because they could understand the journey a bit better and kind of what the team did and didn't do.
Yeah.
So that was super helpful. And I think that allowed us to start converting some of our high performing one-time efforts or experiments into evergreen journeys and campaigns, right? And doing a little bit less experimenting and a little bit more fine tuning. Yeah. And then I think, from a day-to-day perspective, where we're shifting to now, moving into the back half of 2024, is from a CXM. So my teams are DCXMs, our digital customer experience manager, moving from sort of a jack of all trades to more specialization. So we have a variety of digital channels. Now each team member will be responsible for the strategy and delivery of that specific channel, in addition to like staffing, copywriting, supporting the other team members. Yeah. So that's allowing us to say, okay, we know these are good channels. They just need to be well maintained with clear strategy, what they're for, what they aren't for, which customers go to one-on-one, which customers go to group sessions, which customers go to webinars. So that's definitely been a shift for our team. And I think for our organization, really stepping now into this digital for all. So I have OKRs this quarter on reducing inefficiencies for CSMs. We're measuring how much time is it taking you to do all these things? How aware are you of all this content? Creating opportunities for CSMs to, run a Ghostbuster play that we're designing and maintaining and running at scale, and they can just drop people into it. Better queuing for alerts, for emails, for templates, right? Anything we're doing at scale, we want to be able to do in a high touch way as well. Yeah. So that's kind of the new challenge.
Yeah, that's super cool. And thank you for walking me through that. It's a cool journey to witness kind of the birth of a team, and it's kind of scrappy and figuring stuff out, slowly becoming a little bit more established. Some things work, some things don't. You iterate on it before. And I think the key takeaway for me from what you said was, before you go automate a bunch of stuff, go do it manually first, because chances are it's not going to work the way you think it's going to work. And so by doing it manually and by getting a human behind it, you can monitor, you can see what's working, what's not working. And then when it does work, when it does start humming, at that point, then you can turn it into like a fully digital automated thing.
For sure. Definitely a lot of Wizard of Oz automation, right? In the background.
Yeah, right. Hey, I want to have a brief chat with you about this show. Did you know that roughly 60% of listeners aren't actually subscribed to the show on whatever platform they're listening to it on? Now, as you know, algorithms love likes, follows, subscribes, comments, all of that kind of stuff. So if you get value out of the content, you listen regularly, and you want to help others to discover the content as well, please go ahead and follow the show, leave a comment, leave a review. Anything that you want to do there really helps us to grow organically as a show. And while you're at it, go sign up for the companion newsletter that goes out every week at digitalcustomersuccess.com. Now, back to the show. Let's go back on the human element of this a little bit, because what's interesting about, what you guys have built so far is, there's kind of these pockets of teams that a lot of digital functions have. So you've got like the content thing happening, you've got the program management thing happening. Where does what people sometimes call a scaled, team, or like the human element of those motions, the customer facing element of those motions? It sounds like, the CX managers are that today. Is that something you guys plan on continuing on doing, them hosting the office hours and them doing that one-on-one customer engagement? Or, does that slowly morph into its own thing? Or talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think for sure there'll always be a need for that one-on-one engagement,
Yeah.
particularly in our space, right? HR tech, people who are our persona, our admins, are HR practitioners and leaders, and they're in the business, the people business. So at the end of the day, there's always going to be a need for humans,
Yep.
right? And I think what we're experimenting with now is in conjunction with our community, which will be launching soon. We're going to be doing more small group working sessions. We've experimented with that over the past quarter, and that's been really helpful, I think,
Cool.
for folks to not just be one-on-one, and obviously there's times where you need to be, but to be in a group of peers all working through a similar challenge together. So we'll be leveraging some cohort-based groups to allow a bit more scalability and a bit more camaraderie. It can feel, I think, in HR quite alone sometimes. So to have other people who are going through a similar journey with you, sharing wins and challenges can be really helpful. And it's been a really positive experience so far. I think from the webinars perspective, Natalia, you can share a little bit maybe on how we're approaching our education at scale as well.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that, like Kaelon said, there's always going to be the place for this one-on-one interactions, right? Even in the digital world,
Yeah.
right? I think our main differentiation from the high-touch motion, though, right, it's we don't have that relationship building aspect, right? We're not telling our customers, hey, you'll never talk to a human. That's not the case, right? So, like, we want to talk to them. What we're saying is that, our motions are more like scaled oriented, right? And we, assumingly we figure this out and we do this right, we will provide you with the right level of engagement at the
Yeah.
right time of your journey, right?
Right.
So that's kind of like our mantra, right? And sometimes it does mean a one-on-one interaction, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So to the webinar strategy, we are building a curriculum, right? So like, and we do have that curriculum built out right now on the account level. But what we quickly realized, along with our actually maturity model, or like I think we just call like the health model, the maturity model internally, we quickly realized that while the account level health modeling is definitely the right first step and is an absolutely mandatory one, right? What happens when you start to actually execute on that and run those campaigns at scale is that you start to miss the mark on the personalization aspect,
Yeah.
right? So I think like previously I mentioned that like to me digital success has like a few components, and personalization, scalability, proactiveness are definitely one of those, right? So while with the account level maturity model you do get the account coverage part down, right? So you can proactively and at scale reach out to as many accounts as you like. Where you do start to miss the mark is the personalization, all right? And when we started to realize that, right, we actually got a little scared that we will start to lose trust from our customers, right, in the type of content that we're delivering to them,
Yeah.
right? And we definitely don't want that. So that's when we started to kind of pivot towards like user level
Yeah.
approaches, and our content strategy is all persona based right now, right? So when you build curriculum for an admin, and especially in our world, we can have like up to 10 admins per account, and all of these admins are going to have very different responsibilities, right? But I know not all businesses are the same, but think your admins versus your exec personas versus your end users, right? Messaging, level of permission, what's in it for them is
Sure.
going to be different, right, for each one of those personas. So we are tailoring our webinar programs to those personas at the
That's
moment.
cool. Yeah. So important. And I think the fact that you have that level of data to where you actually know who your personas are, or know the users that fall into those persona categories, to be more precise, is amazing. Because I mean, you would be surprised at the number of orgs and leaders that I talk to that just don't have that data. They don't know who their users are, and so they're left to try to figure it out based on what their users are doing and all the kind of backing into that, and it's a huge mess. So that's really cool that you're able to start personalization this early, because I think a lot of orgs don't get there until they're very mature in in terms of length of time with a program like this. So that's super cool, and it kind of takes me to my next question around health scoring, because I understand from our prep conversation that you have built out some health scoring. I'd love to know kind of what that looks like for the account level, but then you also have like user level health scoring in place. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can walk us through that logic. I think I started a little bit already by sharing this like experience of like, okay, first building this account-based health mechanism.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's like pretty standard perhaps, right? So like we're looking at customer behaviors and whether they are doing the things that we know correlate with their success.
Right.
Right. So that's step number one. And then, yes, we decided to realize that that's not enough. All right. And while it's okay, perhaps for the entire company, which is actually the case, and which I think is pretty cool about 15Five, I think our leadership was able to unite us all by this like concept and the importance of the maturity model.
Yeah.
Everyone within the company, whether it's an engineer, or a salesperson, know what our maturity model is, and they are, aligned to it. So that's definitely super helpful and important, and huge kudos to our ELT team for that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, on that level, that's enough, but it's definitely not enough for us when we are talking about scale and when we're talking about delivering value at scale.
Yeah.
Right. So the next logical thing was to start building user journeys.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Kaelon can probably talk a little bit more about the tactical things there, but I think conceptually we're thinking about it like per persona, right? We have different sets of expectations and we have different ways of measuring that. So we are working, for example, so like we have different NPS scoring per personas, and we have different, targets and baselines. And another cool thing that I think is related to that we're working on right now in partnership with our data team is building the engagement score that will be tracking the user behaviors outside of the product. So in addition to tracking the in-product behaviors, which of course is very important, we want to understand how does it help or not, right? If our users are interacting with our webinars, they're consuming our content, they're posting in our community, right? Is this helpful for them to achieve their desired outcomes with us?
Yeah.
So that's the question we're posing, and we are instrumenting it as we speak.
Yeah. That's super cool. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? If ideally you would want a correlation between active community users and healthy kind of usage data in the platform, and vice versa. That's super cool, and I love that you've built essentially an internal, maturity model that you've evangelized, which is super cool. A lot of folks kind of look at their customer health in terms of straight up telemetry or straight up engagement data, and they don't really take into account like where does this customer actually fit in the user journey in relation to that data. So I guess my next question is data. Like we haven't gone down that path, and everybody struggles with data. You just mentioned a data team, and I want to dig in on that a little bit. Like what is that?
Yeah, so I can share a little bit. We certainly do not have the luxury of a fully staffed CX data scientist or anything like that. It's definitely a shared resource across the entire organization. So within product, there's a specific product team solely focused on data science, data analytics. They're using that to drive our AI product in app.
Like a data warehouse situation.
Yeah, so we have effectively a full data warehouse. I mean, if we can get into tools and tactics for sure, but we pipe data from our platform, from Salesforce, Pendo, from SkillJar, where we host our academy courses, right? Zoom for webinar data. So we have everything dumps into a data lake, and then we have dbt piping data back through like a reverse ETL
Cool.
into Churn Zero and into Pendo. So we're collecting the right level of metadata. And that has been, I've been here for 5 years, and it's certainly been a 5-year journey and ongoing. And we do have a great partnership, though, I will say, with the data team. So we have our product data, and they kind of sit in their own world, focused really on leveraging our AI tools, feeding it the right content, continuing to help Spark AI and Copilot deliver great content and value to our end users. And then there's more of the business analyst side, which we work a little bit closer with. Those two worlds are actually coming together in a big way, which I think will unlock a lot of additional insights for us. So I think when it comes to those cross-functional partnerships with scarce resources, again, it's very similar to everything we've talked about every step of the way. You can't come in and ask for 1,000 things, and understanding how data is structured, how tables work, how teams flow, and what that information is representing, so to effectively better communicate with folks, has been, I would say, something worth investing in as a digital team. If you have anyone on your team who's curious about SQL or Python, like there's a lot of great courses out there that will just give you a basic understanding. And then if you get access to at least an explorer view in your data warehouse, where you can run some queries and get some initial findings, and then say, hey, we have this one ask, very concise. I'm seeing this information here. Can we get this fed into a pipeline? And here's what we're going to do with it. Or better, here's the challenge we're trying to solve. We really need one data point at an account level, or one data point at a user level. What do you think the best way is to go about, and let them help engineer a solution, rather than coming up with a list of demands and requirements for a team that's generally very stretched and understaffed in many organizations? So I think I'll say we're in a good position. I think there's obviously always layers you can use to make things better, but certainly compared to where we were a year ago or 2 years ago, it's much better.
It's been my experience, that, well, I'll say the obvious thing. Product usually needs something completely different out of the data lake than customer facing teams or sales teams. Whereas product is, looking at things maybe a little bit more on the aggregate, maybe looking at feature adoption on the whole, like usage data on the whole and things like that. Whereas CS teams are really looking at the minutia, the per account, the per user level, and looking for indicators there. And I think, it's so important to be able to articulate that in a cross-functional kind of engagement with cross-functional leaders, to say, this is what we're after. This is the data that, that we need, or that you like to see. But also, I understand this is the data that you need, because I think there are, it's a two-way street. Yeah, sure, the data team may live in product, but guess what? You are creating insights out of your own data, or out of the data that you get, and out of the tool sets that you have, that you can then feed back to the product team if you know what they're looking for, right? So I just think it's so cool that you have that established relationship, because I think that's a lesson to, a lot of folks, to say, hey, really spend some time on those relationships, because that can be the first thing to ignore. It's super easy to just not.
And I think building collaborative OKRs or goals, however you set goals at your organization, with product managers and product leaders, right? Ultimately, they are accountable to some degree for the usage and adoption of the tool they're investing in. And if they're going to invest in improvements, we need to show that where the need is, right? So yes, there may be differences in the data need, but ultimately, again, coming back to hey, what problem are you trying to solve, and how can we help you solve that? So, hey, product manager in charge of feature Y, you're hoping to get this amount of revenue or customers or whatever through the data system. Hey, I have got 3 great ideas. Let's align our goals so that we're in support of each other. And, on a literal pen and paper level, where you have a shared, a collaborative or a cross-functional OKR for the quarter, and both teams can work on the same direction. And, occasionally those will diverge, or can feel maybe opposing, or a healthy level of tension, right, between what a customer needs and what product wants them to use maybe at a given time. And that's okay. I think that's a healthy tension between teams is always good to some degree, but the more alignment up front, you can have the easier. That way you come with effectively one ask to a data engineer or a data scientist versus, sort of two different dashboards. And if they can build from the ground up, hey, I know we need to double click on this graph and get a list. And I know that list needs to be piped back to whatever CRM you're running out of.
Yep.
If they can engineer for that from the beginning, it's much easier than having to go back and rebuild everything they just did because now CS wants to use it for something else.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's super cool. Well, look, I think we could freaking go on forever because there's a lot of cool stuff to unpack here, and maybe we should do a part 2 at some point. But I feel like just these little insights into like it started here and it's grown into this thing is super powerful, and I can't wait to share this with the audience. But as you guys know, we want to keep it a little bit concise. And so I wanted to kind of get to my closeout questions, which you probably know. The first is I want to know what's like in your content diet. What are you paying attention to? Podcasts, books, white papers, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I am not exaggerating when I say that when I was building this team, I was using this show as my go-to resource. So
cool.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate all the insights that I personally gained from this show. So definitely number 1 on my list. I also follow Unchurned as well. I know, Alex, I think you were in one of the latest episodes.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't checked that one yet, but I will. So I think those are my regular go-tos. But in addition to that, what I personally find helpful is following like some adjacent functional leaders, specifically any PLG teams or growth teams. I am a huge fan of Elena Verna of Dropbox. She has a Substack subscription. So I learned a ton from these, and I do think that we have a lot to maybe borrow from each other and like apply into our world. And I think in addition to that, I'm right now at the stage where I'm trying to continue to work on storytelling with data. So any books that are related to that, I think I bought them all. So yeah, I think that would be my top 5.
Very cool. Kaelon, what are you paying attention to?
I'll double click on both those. I think Gain, Grow, Retain, Jay Nathan's stuff has a lot of great content. And I just also want to, he was one of the first people I reached out to, and he made a lot of great introductions. And honestly, I think as I was stepping into this role, there's a lot of content out there, but the highest value I had was just reaching out to anyone who would talk to me about digital customer experience. And it's amazing the people who are doing cool things and wanting to share their lessons learned along the way. So I've found a lot of there's some helpful Slack communities. Customer Success Collective and DCS Connect have been great resources to find people who are interested in, setting up a 30-minute coffee chat and just picking their brain and interviewing them a little bit on like, what are you doing? How do you approach this? How did you fail fast? And how can I, stand on the shoulders of giants? So those have been great. Pre-Flight is another Slack community more focused on onboarding, but those are the folks over at Rocket Lane, and they're fantastic community and really good events. I think similar to Natalia, like following adjacent functions is helpful. Also, just being an end user and putting not you in their shoes, them in their shoes. Like, what does it feel like to be a user in a digital experience? And particularly in B2C applications, like it's a great place to spark ideas. Think, I really love that email. Let's bookmark that.
Yeah. If you're like me, you have a whole folder of stuff that you're like, oh man, that's cool. I need to save that. And then, you might reference it again. You might not, but it's there. If I can add to y'all's list, the new automation mindset is a book I just finished. It is way, 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 way good. Lots of people talking about it right now, but it is a fantastic read about, AI in today's era of automation and building a culture around this stuff, which is super cool. So highly recommend that one.
Thank you.
Any shout outs?
I mean, I know I mentioned Jay earlier, but through those conversations, I know specifically Aaron Hatton over at Gainsight has doing some really cool stuff, running great events, and put together, I think, a good little free course on digital customer experience. Erica Ackroyd over at Pendo, her episode, and then also we had a little coffee chat, really helped us shift our mindset from account to user and how do you approach that. And then Dan Ennis, I think it was at Monday.com for a long time and over at Workato now, was a great resource and is doing a lot of cool stuff and running some programs with Success Pandas and a few other areas where kind of sharing that knowledge, but all great follows on LinkedIn and have been awesome resources as we're getting stood up here on my side.
Yeah, well, definitely. Yeah, second all of those. Kudos. I think one that I would add, so Elena Balagush from Gorgeous team is, in my opinion, doing some cool things, building this almost like experimentation engine for R&D. So they're testing different experiences for customers prior to sending that as a request for their engineering team.
Cool.
And I love this approach a lot because it allows you to, like, as a digital team, we're a very like agile engine, right? So we can like really learn very quickly and then pass only those things that work to like, a more expensive resource like R&D.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, I have to look into that one. Well, awesome. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you guys so much for taking the time and walking us through the exciting stuff you've built. I think maybe in another 6 months or another 9 months or maybe another year, we should do a check-in and be like, hey, that stuff you were building, how's it going? And, check back in. That might be cool. But where can people find you and reach out to you guys?
Yeah, Alex, please keep us accountable. Yeah, all the things that we're saying we're building right now, check back on us.
That's
we're
right.
all for accountability. Yeah, LinkedIn is the perfect place to find me personally. I'm Natalia Andreeva there. I love our community, whether you are in CX or in growth teams or HR, which is where what our company does. Please connect. I'm happy to have coffee chats or join any events. I love our community, so please reach out.
Awesome. And Kaelon?
I quit the algorithms this year, except for LinkedIn. So You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. It's just Kaelon Russell. And the Slack community, as I mentioned, definitely DM in Customer Success Collective or DCS. I keep those up as open tabs. Yeah.
Amazing. That's cool. Well, thanks again for the time. Much appreciated. And I'll be checking back in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex. This was a great chat.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital CX Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below. It really helps us to grow and provide value to a broader audience. You can view the digital customer success definition word map and get more information about the show and some of the other things that we're doing at digitalcustomersuccess.com. This episode was edited by Lifetime Value Media, a media production company founded by our good mutual friend Dylan Young. Lifetime Value aims to serve the content, video, audio production needs of the CS and post-sale community. They're offering services at a steep discount for a limited time, so navigate to lifetimevaluemedia.com, go have a chat with Dylan, and make sure you mention the Digital CX Podcast sent you. I'm Alex Turkovich. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.